growing sort of at the same pace as the market, so they're not really growing. And they'll feel a pressure, but it's not necessarily a pressure that correlates with having to transform or something like that. It's just like an overbearing thing. And so,
or they can fudge the numbers and look like they're growing. And financial engineering is kind of that term that I look at with some companies, and you'll see their earnings is a step function. Every quarter, it's a step function upward. And it's very apparent when you see it that this is just to make the numbers look good. And, that's to survive, I guess, to make it work so that you can find the next company to acquire and grow. I guess for me, I've just been lucky to see big companies, small companies. I was in a company like IBM. We had 400,000 people worldwide, and then I've got another company where it was me and the CEO locked in a room, and it's literally just us trying to build something from nothing. And that was my first job after IBM, and I learned a lot of stuff in that moment that I don't think I could have done in most traditional, maybe even any traditional roles in a company, because you'll never wear that many hats. You'll never be allowed to take that much ownership in the beginning of your career, especially. So that's why I think startups are important and very beneficial for your career. And some people would say, do it at the start, do it at the end, but I say just do it. Just if you've got an idea you want to go find a right team. I think a team is very important. And you get that chance, that call, take it. I think you should take it, but take it smart. Don't.
We need to unpack that. I think there's a lot of different fun things to talk about with
definitely
startups, and then your experience in working in startups and large companies. So it's super fun to actually have you here today. Been looking forward to it for a while, and I'm here today because Anders and Henrik aren't here today.
We miss them.
Yes and no.
It's hard to fill the shoes. I'm going to do my best here. I brought with me a good friend of mine, Erik, who is a very skilled engineer and has a colorful background that will give us good perspectives on everything from startups, working from the US to Sweden and many other things. But I want to hear the story from your perspective, because the interesting thing is not necessarily the details, but the story, I think. So I want to hear you tell that story. Please introduce yourself. Who is Erik? Who are you?
Thanks for the kind words, Robert. And thank you, Goran, for having me. So Erik Peterson, I'm a computer scientist. I was trained at UC San Diego back in the day, 2009 I graduated. Grew up in California, so I understand my name is ganska svensk. But I don't speak so much Swedish. I'd just been to Sweden for the last 4.5 years. I moved here because, basically I tried everything that I wanted to in California, but I've now been enjoying Sweden, really loving every moment of it, feel very blessed to be here. And computer science, AI, been nibbling at the corners, I would say, in my career, but I actually started with just grunt, in IBM's machine, doing middleware. And at the end of that, I was there for 4 years, started to nibble at analytics and advanced analytics. So it was, I think it's come full circle, this journey for me. But we can get into whichever angle we want.
4 years. 4 years might not seem like a lot. Does it feel like you've been here for a long time now?
The pandemic has really changed my how time feels, and I've been feeling very happy that we can get out more. I was actually very conservative when I was, when we started this pandemic. I changed jobs, so I was at a firm and decided to leave before the pandemic started, and I packed my bags and everything was good. And then I went to London with my girlfriend. We went to a wedding. As we came back from that wedding, the news broke. And we went, basically, I never had my goodbye fika. That was very sad. And then I had to basically give my laptop to a colleague who drove to our house, or to our apartment. And I haven't been back since. And it was a little bit, odd, because I know that goodbye fikas are kind of ganska viktig. It's a part of the culture. but I had to go, and then I've been working now at Swedbank for two years and a couple months, and their transition to working remotely. It's been I've been impressed actually, and I've been very happy to see that, because I think coming from the Valley and knowing a lot of these remote first companies like GitLab, it's been a challenge for all companies, but especially those classic companies that have never had to do this before, remote working and the Zoom calls and time. I mean, I'm looking forward to California now, because I've been here 2 years. I've got my permanent residency, so I'm very happy with that. But I'm looking forward to getting out of Sweden for a little bit, and I will come back obviously, but I want to see the rest of Europe now, actually, and I would love to go hear some more tips, especially Italy, because I know you have some connection there as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, so you have your feet in two places at the very least right now.
Yes.
How did that start? So you're a computer scientist. Tell me about how that computer science journey started. I want to hear from the beginning.
So it's easy. I liked computers as a kid. I think I grew up gaming and was living in the woods, and I found both my parents are scientists. My father was a PhD in oceanography. Mother was a master's in marine biology. And I wanted to be a scientist. I didn't want to do what they did. I ended up doing kind of what they do, especially MATLAB and stuff. I watched that growing up. But I wanted to be a scientist, and I loved computers, and so I just literally put those two words together. It didn't hurt that also that was kind of the hottest career at the time in Silicon Valley, and you're surrounded by a lot of great companies. While I was in college, Google became a thing. And all of the rest that's happened with Silicon Valley and Apple and all that crazy stuff. But computer science, for me, I was building computers. So I think, I loved it and I wanted to learn more. And one thing about me is if I find something and I fixate on it, I just keep studying it. I know I get into cars with you, and for me, I was starting to get into motors and engines and really how do the brakes work? How does this work? How can I safely fix this, or is this going to kill me if it falls on me after I try to take it out? I think that's that engineer's mindset where you just want to know, how does this stuff work? And that was also me with AI. I wanted to just jump in and figure out, what is all this stuff?
How did it end up with computers? Is that something that was related to Silicon Valley, that the computer mecca, or is that part of your family, or how did you?
My father had an old IBM clone, and it had the orange monochrome screen. And you would have the keyboard that you could click out, and mechanical keyboard and all that, and then you could hook that up to a VGA. So we had the color VGA monitor, with the big CRT. That was our first computer that I remember, and the floppies, 5 1/4, 3.5 inch. That was kind of where I started, the 286 era. And I remember my first PC, gaming, building my own stuff. So it's just been a labor of love over the years, and you've seen that Moore's curve, just so much, expansion of power in one little thing. And I think that's been very, it's reinforced a lot of independence, that it allows you to do so much, and you don't need to, go to a big company and pick up the phone and, I need a big giant, computational machine. We kind of do that now with the cloud, but that's another story.
Okay, so you got into computers and you studied computers at university. I'm curious a little bit. I think the journey from university to companies is a little bit different in Sweden than it is in the U.S. I mean, the value of a degree in the U.S., degrees are very highly valued, and here in Sweden, I'm not going to say they're not as highly valued, but we think of them differently. I think a lot of people equate a lot of work-life experience after a certain number of years as maybe being equivalent to some kind of degree, whereas in the U.S. a degree is always a degree. And when you have it, even after 10, 15 years, it's still, a great source of pride. So tell me about your first job after university, or your university years and the transition into work.
I'll tell you about my university jobs. So I feel like I'm a very lucky individual, because my first jobs were not computer jobs. I'm a pretty normal guy. I think if you get to know me, and I started in working retail. I was working in a drugstore. I was working all sorts of odd jobs. I worked at the Kinko's across from Apple. So I got all the people that had to present to Steve Jobs on Monday on Friday night, so they're all stressed out. But my first, I would say, real computer science gig was at Scripps. So Scripps is the Oceanographic Institute in San Diego, La Jolla. And my job was just as a junior systems analyst. And we were taking data and building a report for Arnold Schwarzenegger for the climate change. So that we had 3 models or 2 models. One model is if we cut emissions by this much and we do the right stuff, what's going to happen to the rainfall? And then the second model is if we don't do anything, what's going to happen? And we were basically looking at 2 scenarios where we're not going to have enough water. And lo and behold, X number of years later, like we are very low on water. And so growing up with an oceanographer and a marine biologist in the family, I learned the water cycle, very early and how it all, connects. And one of the things that I've learned about my father in his writing was that he started as a geologist and then he came into oceanography and connected the two. And I think that's really interesting when you see these domains kind of merging and morphing together. When you have just one expertise, and this is something I'm very cognizant of, that maybe I only know about computers, but if you have 2 domains that you really feel passionate about, this is where you can find really interesting insights and new ways of thinking about something that no one else has really had the time or knowledge to bring together. And for him, it was about salinity, the geology of the oceans, and his job was like focusing on the ocean connecting to the streams and the estuary system, the water cycle there. But that's enough about him, maybe.
Well, I mean, that's super cool. I think a lot of people think of computational biology, computational genomics, computational everything. Everything is becoming computational. What year was this? And did they call this data science, the stuff that you were doing? Or what was it? What did
I was an analyst, so I think data science, if it was a term, it was not a term that was in the halls of Scripps. We were using Fortran. So we were still kicking around with Fortran. I think I was trying to use Java and just do some processing on stuff. But that was my first gig. I came in at about 2005. And I said, so the reason I got that job was, unfortunately, I have to admit, like, I knew the guy. So his name was Dan Can. I love Dan Can dearly. He was family, so he would come to our house up in Northern California. And so I said to him, I've gotten into UC San Diego. Can you get me a job at Cal IT Squared? And he said, look, Erik, I don't know those guys, but you could come and work with me and in the hydroclimate department. Those connections were so key. And this is what I try to do in my current role and my current career is to be open and inviting to people who don't have those connections and to volunteer. And especially from being like a half Mexican family, we have so much work to do to connect each other so that we can find people that want to do these roles, but just haven't had that push or that just that mentorship to know that you can do it. If you want to do AI, anybody can do work in this space. I don't think it's there's maybe some magic, but I mean it doesn't take everybody to have magic. We need to work together, especially on domains, domain expertise.
Was that something you were aware of at the time, or was it just happenstance that you knew that? Or rather that you ended up working in a couple of jobs while you were in university, building up a network and all those things that now, retrospectively, you might be like, yeah, that was a good move.
I have a necessity to try and work while I was in university. I couldn't do it. It was just too hard. So I was doing work and realizing that my studies were suffering. It was the hardest thing I ever did graduating, but it was worth it. And I feel very proud of that degree afterward. But one story was like I learned all the wrong things in university. That was the best thing. So I deleted a database in prod, and the director, he came to me and said, "Oh, the production's gone." And I was like, "I don't know what happened." And now I've learned like you just got to be honest, and it's set me right ever since to just be open and honest, but also to use infrastructure as code and back up your stuff. And he had a backup, so everything was fine, because I'm sure he had plenty of university students do that before. But you just don't know what you don't know, so you're just so nervous, and it's easier to open up. And I learned a ton from him. I'm still in contact with him. Abel, he was even offering me to come back to San Diego, and I said I'm enjoying Sweden, but thank you. It's just been a blessing.
That's funny. That's your first step into operations, unwillingly deleting the database.
Yeah, I was doing JSR, Java Bean stuff, and I'm glad that those days are over. I learned Java, I use Java, but I'm glad data science is kind of not too much. I mean, I know under the hood, PySpark is powered by Java, but this is kind of you're standing on the shoulders of giants, and now there's this layer that most people are not even aware of how this stuff all works. You're just doing the data science on top of it. And I've noticed this with some people that if you don't have a database, they're not quite sure what do you do, what do I do, and you got to give them the data, put it somewhere, and then they're ready to rock and roll. But for me, I'm kind of used to, I could do the hardware, could go in and do some ops. We were doing a bunch of microservices at one of the places here in Sweden. Just redo it all. One of my favorite things to do is come in and find a mess, and then we just start over.
The ideal situation.
Not the ideal. I mean, I like to show that, there's always these parts of the companies where nobody touches that. Nobody knows how this works. That's the stuff I'm like, let me at it. I want to see what is all this stuff, and it's just zeros and ones. A lot of it is, to me, just zeros and ones, and the plumbing, and reading a patient out like a system. It's just takes time. And
maybe you have the experience for that now that you're not.
It didn't happen overnight, no. And that was how I got lucky to come into Sweden as I did. And I don't think I told you yet the full story.
I want to hear now, because you mentioned that your parents were academics, and so I'm very curious about the transition from academia to the corporate world. You must have been sort of not expected, but you had the choice of staying in academia and going to the corporate world. Tell me about that transition, and what was it what you expected? What's the significant difference, and so on? So I, coming from a couple academics, was not expected to become an academic, but I thought, okay, I gotta go get a PhD, just like my dad, or a master's. And what I realized later was that academia was not for me, and I was scared when I didn't know, that the industry was actually where I belonged, and I didn't know that at the time, but it was not my expectation. I thought. And this is kind of growing up in the woods of California, deep in the woods. You just kind of don't know what you don't know. And as I've slowly traveled further and further away from home, first going to San Diego and then going to other parts of the world, it just opens my eyes that you didn't know anything, young Padawan. So it's been a joy to see that in industries actually where I feel now more comfortable. But now I'm starting to go back and realize if you want to excel in data science, you do need to read these papers, because this is where the hot stuff is now possibly forming. Let's circle around that for a second. First, please tell me more about what it was that convinced you that academia wasn't for you. How did you know that?
Well, I think when I didn't get an offer to get a master's degree, UC San Diego, they say that a bachelor's there is like a master's anywhere else. And I believed it, because I was there and doing things in my bachelor that I didn't hear a lot of other people doing, like compilers. We were doing compilers and assembly. And after that, I realized I really just need to get working. I want to work at a company, and I just didn't have the passion to go into computer science deeper yet. It was more about connecting with business and just seeing what was going on in the Silicon Valley, which was where I was originally from. And I think San Diego, I'll always miss it, but I had my eyes set on, I need to go learn what's going on in Silicon Valley and go back home and see what's what.
I think computer science or data science right now is at a very interesting crossroads where we see people that do have a very solid grasp of the theory and are very practical, have the greatest advantage. There are some people that have learned Python and other things out of necessity. Yeah. They've learned it in order to do analysis, but they might not be familiar with core computer science concepts, compiler design, data structures, algorithm design, and that kind of thing. Has that sort of helped you, that background, the computer science background? Do you think it's underappreciated, or how does it fit in?
I will never forget when I came to Sweden and I got my first gig. It was in consulting, and I met my colleagues. And in Silicon Valley, you go to a coffee shop, you're going to trip and probably hit a few people who are doing JavaScript. But in Sweden, it's a little different. And here, the focus in this company was on mechanical engineering and other disciplines. So I introduced myself, and they're like, "So what are you doing? What are you doing here?" And I said, "I'm a computer scientist." And they said, "Oh, you're IT." And I think that was a bit. I want to respect like the IT industry. I think it's important, but everyone is someone else's IT until you're at almost the C level, you know. And for me, I was like, computer science is different. It's science. And then I realized the longer I've gone in the industry, a lot of it is just plumbing. We're not doing computer science, but your awareness of these techniques, these algorithms, they are critical to not going down the wrong path with maybe some of the usual suspects of stuff, of what you could do. But now I wouldn't mind doing IT, I think it's different. I think now IT and business need to work closer together. And in the past, I guess in Sweden, you had like totally different companies. You had IKEA, and then you had IKEA IT, and they were almost different cultures. And I'm still seeing that now in certain circles that I've worked in, that they're thought of as like the other, and I think that's been a mistake, and that's why you see them coming back together. And I think it's fantastic. We need to mix up even more, perhaps.
Well, isn't it like that when a role is not well understood enough, it just becomes, you're the webmaster, everything web, or you're the data scientist, everything data. And now people are sort of splitting it out into ML engineer, ML ops, data scientist or researcher and that kind of thing. Have you gone from being the one that does everything into going into one of those roles, or are you still everything?
So the term would be like a generalist, right?
I suppose.
I feel like I'm a generalist, and the reason for that is that my career has literally kind of touched every little thing, just so. And I've never gone deep on something until maybe machine learning, because it takes so much to even just start scratching at the surface. I still don't feel like I would be comfortable just saying, I'm just only going to do machine learning for the rest of my career. I think there's so many interesting problems, and there will be new technologies that we can't even fathom yet. So why limit yourself? But I think for now, I need to focus and get some more time, and enjoying spreading the knowledge about what is all this stuff. Because there's plenty of people that I think are in different engineering disciplines, and they're realizing that, okay, these are becoming commodified and we need to up our skills. Or I'm just interested in all this data science stuff, and what is it? And as I came back into it from years and years of doing other things, I've realized some things have changed, but some things have not really changed so much. Like the BI world was very familiar, because as IBM was trying to sell in that space, coming back into it, I kind of see the same names that when I left, I was like, oh, SPSS is still here. Okay, I kind of can hang a little bit. But the skills of computer science, they've never taken me wrong. I think if anything, I wish I could do some papers. When I read some of these things, it really inspires me. And seeing your work, actually, as you talk about Julia. When I saw you at Nordic Data Science Summit back in 2017, I was like, this guy, he knows, you're scratching in that deeper level of he's talking about stuff that no one's talking about with Julia Lang versus Python. And I just thought that was so cool.
I think that the fun part is connecting the dots across different domains. Like you were talking about, somebody that both knows computer science and marine biology or some other branch of science. And even within computer science, being able to do both databases and data science and other stuff, it really allows you a lot more. And you have had the opportunity to both work on existing problems and come up with your own products, because I know you're a bit of an entrepreneur yourself, and
yes.
You've been involved in various projects like that. Tell me a little bit about, how your experience in both of those fields.
Sure. So going in chronological order, we started IBM. Obviously, there's a lot of pre-existing product at IBM, and you're just kind of like, here, take this and hold it. A lot of talented people there, but we were not part of the business that's going to create stuff. We were around those people. They're in research, but we were kind of productize this thing, and we were focusing on healthcare data. Then I left and went to a startup, and there you don't have anything but the internet and your brain and coffee, and lots of coffee. The CEO, he was ex-analytics guy from the BI world. He wanted to do the quantified self. And he told me his pitch. It was the only job in town. I was in a town in the middle of, I want to not say nowhere, but Petaluma, California is known for eggs and Lagunitas beer, not for startups. But I bumped into him. Work Petaluma was this co-working space that I started hanging around in. and just made a name for myself there, doing some small jobs, and one thing led to another. I think the part of my career that I look back on with the most enjoyment is those times where you really just get a blank sheet of paper and you talk with customers and you build together and collaborate, because they need you. They need us to make things happen, and they kind of know what they want, but once you start talking to them, like, oh yeah, we can do this, we can do that, they realize that they haven't even gotten ambitious enough, and they can go even further, but you still have to scope it and, pick some time boxes, as they say.
That's funny, though, that you're helping them sort of express their own problems using words that they might not even know, and that kind of thing. What was it that made you make the shift to begin with, though, from the corporate world to the startup world? And also, you were mentioning before that there can be pressure in the workplace. How is the pressure different from the pressure you feel at a place like IBM and in a startup?
So I love the IBMers. I'll say that, but the corporate life was not for me. And when you're from the Valley, you're going to know the cultures are very different. IBM is an East Coast company. It's from New York. And the Valley is the Valley. You've got Yahoo at the time, Google, later you had Facebook. These cultures are very different from each other, but I think I was ready to jump into open source. Open source is actually one of the most important parts of my career, and it changed my life. And I have UC San Diego to thank for that, pushing me into Linux and all other things in there. If I'd not been at university, I don't think I would have found Linux at all, or Vim, or all these other things.
Can you expand on that? Well, I think for a lot of our listeners, they might not be familiar with how companies are different East Coast to West Coast. What is open source associated with there and those cultures?
IBM had a big open source component. So IBM was building Eclipse IDE. They were building a lot of open source tools. They contributed to the Apache projects that we all know and love, including Spark, I believe. But I think after 4 years, I realized I wasn't quite getting anywhere, and I needed to try something new. And I'd kind of seen a lot of my friends move to Google. And I just felt like I need to use Git. Part of the problem is, as a developer, and we talked about developer experience, this is very critical for us, how we work and what we're able to do and how we're able to work. So when I started to realize that we have to use ClearCase instead of Git or Perforce or what have you, you start to be limited in your feeling that I have control over my time. And as developers, especially young up-and-coming developers, you're like, I should be building all sorts of startups and rocket ships at this point. And that was, I think, the not FOMO, but just that feeling like there's more out there. And I was totally correct. I mean, there was so many startups. I went to a bunch of meetups, had a blast, met a lot of people that were much smarter than me, and just tried to gain their knowledge and try and likewise to return the favor. But open source and IBM, I think they were interlinked. They still are. But when you go to a startup, now you're consuming all of that open source and putting it together in new ways that maybe IBM or these other bigger companies, they're not so concerned about this kind of product or this marketplace. But you as a startup, you have an idea, the quantified self. So we were focusing on a particular market, which was triathletes. And so we were focusing on the problem of you have Garmin, you have Y-Things, you have Fitbit, and all this data, but it doesn't talk to each other. There's no singular place to put all this data together and do something with it. So the startup was basically this CEO's idea of taking all that data and helping triathletes rest, because they never rest enough. They're always overtraining. So these kinds of niches are really interesting to me, and that's what startups, I think, are really meant for, is to find those niches and exploit them faster than the bigger companies can. Unfortunately, Apple came out with their Apple Watch. The CEO basically had made a lot of money in his career already. He had sold his company back to Fair Isaac, and he said, Erik, this is really great, but I'm just thinking I'm going to go sell books on Amazon now. And I was like, that's not for me. But thank you, and I'll always be grateful for Chris. He gave me a shot when there wasn't really anybody else around up in the North Bay. I was living up there just on a whim, trying to get something new going, and it was perfect timing. But then I had to leave and went back down to the South Bay.
Okay, that's funny. So there are some pretty clear parts in your life where you have sort of made grand steps forward, and you've
leaps
done the
forward and
university,
back. Yep.
the corporate life at IBM. Now you've done a startup journey. What came after that?
Well, I was walking in the hills, the mountains of, if you know Silicon Valley, you know Stanford. Mm-hmm. So behind Stanford is the mountain range that goes from about, Pacifica down to Los Gatos. And I was recording a birthday message for my sister in Swedish, Spanish, and English. And I was never in Sweden, so my Swedish was probably terrible at the time. But I was recording this message on a video, and it turned out one of the first 50 employees of Google was watching me. And he's retired. He's done. He's done everything. He's just hiking, and he says, "Hey, can I ask you what you're doing?" And we got to talking, and I found out who he was, and it turned out I had an interview at Google the next week, and I was just looking for that next thing. So I had interviews lined up. I interviewed at Facebook, Google, but I think I was really meant to just stay in these kind of teams where I was feeling a little bit more of smaller culture, and so I ended up working for his friend Frank. And Frank was, I have to say, humble, genius. If you've ever used Nextel walkie-talkie phones, he was one of the contributors to that technology. And it just so happened he was doing a consulting firm, and he needed some help on front end. So I was doing Android stuff for him, and there was a small team, about 5 of us. That was some of the most fun I think I'd ever had, and it's just by luck. So if you need a job in Silicon Valley, my tip is just go hiking. And maybe like start singing.
Talk about techie stuff randomly.
Exactly. Put some stickers on, and I'm sure you're going to get asked like, "Hey, what are you doing?"
That was a transition. Would you say that was consulting work you were doing at that point?
Definitely consulting in the Valley.
How was the difference between working on a product in the Valley and consulting?
I mean, the money was there. So when you're at a startup, I mean, you're hand to mouth pretty much. And it was a labor of love. And I was learning kind of analytics. We were using PHP because that was what the CEO wanted. And what the CEO wanted, he gets, right? So we did that. But when I got to consulting, Frank had this whole package. It was, here's some money and a laptop and a 4K monitor, and just get this stuff done. And we had a great time. And we launched that app. It was for a security company. So we had 10 million downloads first couple days, I think. 10 million downloads, 20,000 concurrent users. And for me, this is the real stuff. This is why I think IBM didn't really scratch that itch, was like, I'm seeing computational power, like 20,000 concurrent users. That's the kind of stuff that gets you, noted in the Valley. And for him, it was just another day at the office. He's like, oh yeah, this is, And I learned later how that stuff worked. Asynchronous, requests are more performant than if you try to handle them in a synchronous way and all that kind of stuff. And it reminded me, okay, this is your computer science 101. Then that finished, and then I had a new gig with them. Didn't work out so well, but that was my last job before I came to Sweden, actually. And while I was in that gig, this second job, I saw my friend get married in Germany. And so now I start going to Germany, and I say to myself, I should go to Sweden. I've never been to Sweden. I don't know anything about it, and that seems wrong. And little did I know how Swedish my name is, Erik Peterson. But I didn't speak any Swedish. I didn't know anyone in Sweden. I knew about IKEA and Volvo, and that was about it, actually. But I knew we were from somewhere in Sweden. Now I know, a little bit more, luckily. But landed, fell in love with Stockholm. I landed in Stockholm, was there for a week. And it feels a lot like San Francisco used to feel in the early 2000s.
That's awesome to hear. Tell me more about that. Like what?
It's Söder, Knivsöder. It's that feeling of you're just walking these streets and there's something special about it. And I get this all over Sweden, actually. Being half Swedish, I see people that look like my family. And it's kind of endearing that I just feel this connection. I can't explain it. I would never have expected in a million years to move to Sweden. I wanted to move to China or India or go somewhere kind of different. But it happened the way it happened. And so I went to the wedding, told all my friends I'm moving to Sweden. And they're like, what? No, you're crazy. Well, why are you moving to Sweden? Like, this doesn't make any sense, Erik. And I was like, no, I really like it. I really like it. And I went back to that job. I quit maybe a month later. And it was working out because I was like, oh, this isn't really for me. React JS and front-end stuff, I will never do JS again unless it's something new. Like, well, they'll have to convince me. But no, I came out, and that's when I started machine learning. this is when I wanted to focus. And so I had no job, and I just went to the coffee shop, and I started going on all the certificates that I could. And you'll see it on my LinkedIn. I just had so much time, and I just poured myself into everything that I could find. And because I had some money, I could do that. So I was very lucky. And then here's the trick. So how do people get into Sweden? I tell them, put your LinkedIn location as Stockholm, and by that Monday morning in Sweden, you'll get some messages. So, and I know that this is probably because of my name, what happened, but I put my LinkedIn location as Stockholm. By that Monday morning, I got 2 offers to talk, and they say, "Hey, Erik, vad händer? Kan vi prata lite grann?" And I don't know Swedish, so I'm putting this into Google Translate, like, yeah, let's meet up. And I got a plane ticket a couple months later, flew in, coordinated a couple interviews, took one of those jobs, and the rest was history.
That is awesome. That's a cool story.
It's crazy.
Okay, so you basically got the job and went back and forth and a couple of times and chased your dream and got to Sweden. What was the first gig you got here in Sweden?
So we were a firm, not a big firm, but a sort of French consulting firm. And I remember some people were like, why don't you go to this one or that one? I'm like, they're all the same. And I learned later that was not true, actually, at all. So this firm was known for mechanical engineering. So I'm this fish out of water talking about AI and machine learning and CUDA and blah, blah. And everyone's just like, okay, Erik, you're IT. Just go over there in the IT corner. But my first gig was actually in banking. So there was a pitch for a bank in Norway, and I filled this out. There was some document processing stuff. And I said, okay, here's what you could do with AI to take these documents, process them, do OCR, do your thing, classify them. And I won. We won a bid, and I was like, okay, what's that mean? And so now I'm flying to Norway, and I've just landed in Sweden. Now I'm flying to Norway to go to a bank, and I've always wanted to work in banking. So that was like, this is pretty cool. Now, the problem was I didn't want to move to Norway because I'm not Norwegian, so I didn't feel like I should go to Norway just yet. So I said, thank you. You know, a bunch of other people took over, and I helped and wrote a paper. We kind of fleshed out the offer a little bit more. But no, it was then after that, I was waiting. And this is the most nervous part of consulting. When you're on the bench and you don't have a gig and you just aren't sure, am I going to get deported? This was my fear now. So there's this saying in the Valley, like only immigrants make good companies. And I was like, well, I'll just go become an immigrant then, because I think I could do something. And I come over to Sweden, and now I realize like it's totally different. It's very being an immigrant. There's a fear factor in my job, and I just needed to perform, to a certain level. And I realized that was kind of silly because everyone was just happy to have me. But in my mind, I was always there was that pressure to make sure that everyone was happy with what I was doing. But no, then I got assigned. I walked into an automotive vendor. I'm sure you could guess which one if we're in Stockholm, but it was one of the big ones. And the rest was history. I was going down there, and I went in basically, it was like, MacGyvered my way in to fix everything. And it was a joy because I got paired up with, I don't know if I can say her name, but we'll call her V. And V was fresh out of university, KTH. She had just gotten her master's, and she was not a computer scientist. And I'll never forget this. She said, Erik, you're a good teacher. And I take that as the biggest compliment because I love this stuff, computer science and technology and AI. But if only I'm doing it, it's not as good of a feeling if you're not getting something out of it. It's not just about me, it's about the team. And so she was building a Vue.js full stack web app, and she had a great time. We built some UIs to control some stuff. She's since rotated into an industrial PhD, and we're still in contact. She's doing the autonomous stuff. So it's very cool, like just small ecosystem, smart people. I just keep bumping into them. But then after that, into banking a couple of years later.
Nervousness disappeared when you got that job at the automotive vendor. Did you feel that you had secured your spot here? And I'm also wondering, you integrated into the teams and into you're practically Swedish now, if you ask me. So I have a lot of friends that are working at cool IT companies here. Sweden's such a good IT hub, right? And they have these neat software startups where there are people from all sorts of countries that aren't citizens, and they're liking it here, and they want to stay in Sweden,
make their mark.
Yeah. So, like, what was? I'm really. I want to hear you talk more about that imposter syndrome that some of us, feel, but for people that are immigrants, must be even more thinking that they have to overperform and all that kind of stuff. Like, what now, given your current perspective, would you advise people that are immigrants that are trying to work in data science or wherever and trying to establish themselves here in Stockholm?
I have a friend of a friend who we're trying to get in now, and I think the hardest part is just that first gig. And we told her this, that the first gig is the hardest, because even UC San Diego, as notorious or as prestigious as it is, when I walk the streets and I tell people like, oh yeah, it's UC San Diego, that's not the same as, it's not going to sound as good as KTH or Lund or Uppsala or Chalmers. I've heard great things about Chalmers, and so it's a different world, it's a different market, and my advice is just be open to talking with people maybe you would be not talking to usually online, and LinkedIn was a valuable resource for me. If I didn't have that post and I didn't change my location, I would not be here. I'm pretty sure. And as the world's opening up and more opportunities to build come to the fore, we're going to need that talent, more people that can do. And I think as long as you exude that attitude of being willing to come in and work together, it's only going to help you. And but that first gig is the hardest, as I've seen. So I'm still trying to actually get that person a shake at coming over, because I think I love Sweden. I really have benefited, and I know I have a different story because of my name. If anything, I get more harassment because why don't you speak Swedish, Erik? What happened? Did your father not raise you correctly or something? Yeah. So it's kind of these questions of what's wrong. But we left in 1850, and as I said, I didn't know anybody, so I just came in blind. And but the people had been welcoming, and I saw that they've been welcoming in a lot of circles with everybody, and it's been really cool. I've met people from parts of the globe I've never gotten to talk to before.
But that self-doubt that was there in the beginning, or the feeling that you had to overperform and maybe perceptions of glass ceilings, were they warranted, or were they sort of limitations you had put on yourself?
I think it was, one of my biggest critics is myself. And I think I have a high bar of myself and also of others. And I like to keep pushing. I've heard this a lot in my life where, you got this, now you're set. No, there's always something next that I want to do or that I can do. And I think, I don't know where that came from, but it's always driven me to do more. If I hadn't had that, I don't think I would have left California, let alone, the United States. Because I think a lot of people would choose maybe, I'll move to Austin, or I'll go to New York or something. And I just felt, I just got to do something different. And when I saw Sweden and in particular Stockholm, there was some feeling that I can make this work. And I had some friends that literally told me, you're not going to make it. You're not going to make it. And later they ate their words. And for me, maybe that was what drove me, like to prove something.
Now you're posting on LinkedIn every day.
No, it's pictures of, downtown, Stockholm and beautiful shots. And they came over, actually. They were at Lush. Is it Lush?
Oh, nice.
He's over at Google. And I love it because I do all my AI stuff on my own machines, not on the cloud, because I don't want to pay that bill. But he said, Erik, why are you doing all this stuff? Like, you should be use GCP. Come on. I'll give you some credits. Just put your stuff on here. I was like, come on, man. It's different. I've always lived on, I guess, the edge of computing because it's cheaper, but it's also the thing that's the hardest to do. There's there's dearth of talent of people who actually know how those data centers are built. How do you build these racks? How do you build the, interconnectivity? This is now, I think, the next hard part for Web3. We didn't go into that yet, but what is Web3, and is it just a buzzword? I think it mostly can be, but there's some interesting technology. I was talking with Goran about zero tier and this tailscale stuff, where you're building private mesh internet for whatever purpose you want. It could be data science, private data science infrastructure that doesn't require you to pay a bunch of money through the nose.
Right. Oh, we should get into that. I think there's a good segue here, because if we're going chronologically here now, you have...
Wait. wait, we need to get into the deep. So right now the topic was like basically moving from US to Sweden. You're painting it was everything so peachy and nice.
Oh.
All right, so
It wasn't.
what was the hardest part? Because you didn't just land it here, right? You got the job and etc. It was a little bit of a struggle. As you and me, we met 2017 in August 11th, I believe it was. I just came back from holidays. And I remember the discussion then and the several months after. So what was the hardest part?
Ooh. So the way I met Goran was also dumb luck. I posted on LinkedIn again, and I said, "Hey, I'm Erik. I'm in Stockholm. I'm working computer science and data and stuff. And if anybody's around, and I don't even think I said that. I just said hi." And Goran, first up, replies, "Nice to meet you, Erik. Hey, let's grab lunch sometime." And I was like, lunch? This is the difference between the Valley and I would say Sweden, especially Sweden, that no one's going to buy you lunch if you just show up. Maybe they would, but this stuck out. And he bought me lunch. He invites me to the Nordic Data Science Summit, sight unseen almost. And I told my story. I'm kind of just kicking around. I had not quite gotten my footing yet. So I think the hardest part was just keeping at it. There were a lot of people I watched drop off and move somewhere else. It was tough.
I was not going to that part. I was going for how hard was it to get all the documents that you need?
Gosh.
That was the part, because I believe there is a story here to be told. I think that your story is so fantastic, because it's so first of all, we are so lucky to have you here, right?
I'm feeling lucky to be with you guys.
Right. So and I think it's a great example and of what should be happening. The Nordic is the cradle of innovation and has been like this for many decades now. But but we cannot forget that it was also because of this pool of talent from all over the world that came and built companies like Nokia's and Ericsson's and etc. Right. And right now the situation is a little bit opposite. So we need to attract talent.
Certainly.
Right? But the bureaucracy around it, it's quite hard.
Yes.
Right?
It's scary.
And exactly. And I know, and we have we have discussed this before, and I wish that some of these politicians will sit down on this table someday and they would just basically plain honestly say like, hey, we have a plan. We want to attract people, and we're going to make this easy for them to come to Sweden, because Sweden is a land of opportunity. We need a lot of people like you here, and we need to make it very easy for those people to come here. We need to attract them.
And to stay, yeah.
Right, and to stay. That is a different story by itself. Yes. But first of all, just to get everybody, to move here. And that is a bureaucratic nightmare, because it's not bureaucratic nightmare, but it takes time. It's hard. First, you need to get the social security number. Okay. Then you need to get in order to get the social security number, you need to have a job. So if you don't have a job, you don't have social security number. But you cannot get the social security number if you don't get a job. So it's a loophole, right? So you need basically to get like a strong employer to get you to plead for your case in order for you to get it faster. And then once you get in the system, then it's easy. It's getting easier.
Okay.
Tell
easier,
me,
right?
what are the tough parts? Well, I just want to add also that like in many of these companies, the IT companies of Sweden, and I don't want to say like Stockholm is a little Silicon Valley, because we're not copying anything here, but if you want to be an entrepreneur in Sweden, the barriers aren't as great as you would imagine, especially given with how little people are incentivized in university to go for entrepreneurship, when I was in university here in Sweden, they were like, go to Google. That's the coolest place to be. They weren't saying start a company like they do in the Baltics and those places where maybe there aren't big companies like Volvo and stuff to hop onto. Your only choice is to start a company. But at the IT companies that are here in Stockholm, like 50% of the people are from, everything from Belarus, Romania, Greece, Spain, and other places. And we need all of those people to fill out the talent pool, like you're saying. Yeah,
exactly, because we are missing quite a lot of talent. And if you see the discussion in the Nordics in the past 3, 4, 5 years has been like, hey, we are missing a lot of talent. I think it was in Sweden, it was stated that 77,000 IT professionals are needed right now. That was a statement from 3 years ago. Right now, I think it's even more, because we have become a region that is exporting talent and not importing talent, and which is very bad if you want to be an innovative country, region in a country.
Yeah, it's more embarrassing when people are saying we want to come to Sweden,
yes,
and they're not able to.
Exactly. And so probably if Erik right now goes to Silicon Valley, say like, hey guys, this is a wonderful country, we have all of these things and etc. There is a plenty of job. I think that, and there was like 2 people now from United States on Data Innovation Summit. They really like the culture, they would like to move. But it's not an easy process. So if you make it easier, we're going to get more talent, because there are more people that like to have more quality type of living, and they're good.
So
Erik, so you got the stuff. Now it's smooth sailing, right?
I guess.
Or
this is the thing.
That's
like,
what I want to know.
I'm from outside, so I guess it's all smooth. I think it's a good segue to say I'm the ambassador to Sweden for University of California, San Diego. And so I mentor students constantly, and I tell them, we've got jobs out here. Would you like to move here? And it's a big, tall order to move across the world for them. And there's also a lot of things going on in the United States. So you're from University of California perspective, they've got a lot of stuff going on. And I said, wait, we've got stuff going on here too. But the system was daunting, and I made mistakes. So first mistake, came to the country, flew in on a tourist visa, got my job, I thought. And then I started waiting to get ready to work. Now everything's sorted out because, they basically found out that I was there, and they said, you have to leave. And this is the system now telling me, you need to go back to California. Now I never got that quote or that message because I was already back in California, but luckily I'd put my home address as my boss's address at his office, and he said, can I open your letter? And I said, yeah, of course, please, I'm in California, please open my letter. And he said, oh, you're not supposed to be, you can't come back right now. So I had to finish this paper for this bank, in Norway, on the wrong time zone, and wait for something to happen. And it was very scary, and I always felt like I don't know what's going to happen. I still can't read Swedish. This is something I'm working on, going to Folkuniversitet. You can, go to Swedish courses, but it takes time. And I think some people are too quick to say you don't need Swedish. I highly disagree. I think it's critical, actually, for certain, especially if you're going to start a company. You need to read those contracts, because they mostly are not going to come in English. So there's a lot of barriers to entry. I think my story is actually very, by retrospect, easy. There were other stories next to me. I won't put those names out there because I don't know if they want me to say this, but they were almost, kicked out, and unfairly, I would say. And they're now at Microsoft, and very talented individual, but they were almost kicked out on I don't know,
technicalities.
It seemed that way, and I was also scared because I changed jobs before my 2 years was up. So this was very tricky. I had a month left on my visa, and I needed to now change visas in the pandemic for the new, renewing the visa with a new company. Now, luckily, my employer had the strongest team, Ernst & Young, and they handled everything perfectly. I slept better at night once that was done, and ever since it's been smooth sailing. But I know that's not always the story, and I was still sweating because I just you want to stay, you really want to stay, but you just don't know what's going to happen. And I read these stories of Americans, along with many other people, who on a technicality didn't get it, and I didn't get my person number for months. I didn't have a bank, here, so I was paying with my U.S. card and paying the Forex fees, but I can say strongly it was all worth it. But in the moment, I just felt like, what am I doing? I need my person number. I need this bank card, and it's just one thing after the other.
Man, that weighs you down. That's I had nightmares after finishing university for years, where I was thinking that they were going to call me back and said that I had messed up and that I didn't get credits and all that kind of stuff. And it must be the same thing for you, where you think you've done the right thing, but you don't know, and you're waiting for a call, and it's screwing with you, and you're trying to plan, what am I going to do 6 months from now? And it's funny because getting that letter for you is like basically stop being productive. You haven't filled in the papers yet. You're not allowed to do any good work.
I had some great friends help me, and I also think Google. Google's got that lens where you can translate stuff. That got me through a lot of paperwork. AI got me through a lot of this stuff.
AI got you into Sweden.
AI helped me get into Sweden. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. It was I can't read Swedish still. Jag kan läsa lite grann, men pyttelite grann. Så.
Cool. All right. Well, cool. So great. Now you're in Sweden. You've gotten a couple of jobs, and you are currently working in
my dream.
Your dream
Svenska
job.
dröm.
And so you've been telling me that you've always wanted to work in fintech, in finance. Is that something that you've been keeping your eye on for a while? How did you get into that field, and what was the beginning of that? Let's start from the beginning.
So I would say not so much fintech. So I think this is a very important distinction. I like finance, and I think I will never forget this. I had an interview with a company, I won't say where, and it was here in Sweden. And I said, no, thank you. And I'm going somewhere else. I'm going to a financial firm. And they said, oh, which fintech firm? And I never replied. I'm not being cagey, but it wasn't their business. Like we had a good interview and I thanked them, but it was not fintech. And I know that this is very strange. Like a lot of people would wonder, why do I want to go in there? It had to do with my university days in computer science and the financial crisis. So for me, my financial history, my father basically got cancer twice. The first time in the American system, he had experimental drug and beat it. But the second time, he unfortunately did not. We are okay. We're okay now. He had a pension through federal government, but there were many times we were not okay. And that always struck me that my dad's so intelligent, my mom, they're both trained scientists, and yet we're still kind of, everything's not quite maybe as good as it could be or should be. And I wondered, with this financial crisis in the housing market, what is all this stuff? Again, this engineering mindset of what is all this stuff? Let me break this down. And for me, I was graduating from university. I had just gone to Lehman Brothers that summer before to visit. And we did this like bankers West Coast thing through the international investment banking club that I was a part of. And my ambition was to become a quant, because that was what computer scientists do in banking, and become a quant. But 2008 hit, and the Fed came in, and all the rest that happened, and this company that had billions and billions and billions of dollars, it didn't have any billions of dollars anymore. And I just visited them, and this guy had a Rolex and everything seemed really great. What was it? What just happened? So that kind of marked the rest of my career and my life, this moment of the financial crisis. And I've been very focused on finance ever since, because for me, this is a domain that touches everything. Everything needs money, whether you're investing for the future, or you're borrowing to pay something down, or you're trying to invest to get ahead. All of this stuff is requiring currency, money, and this concept. It was very different from computer science, which to me was quite straightforward: zeros and ones, and the arithmetic units, and building the electrons to go this way or that. But with finance, there's a lot of dark money, black pools, and these things fascinated me a lot. And I was actually studying the capital markets while I was supposed to be studying for my finals. Instead, I was just watching the markets and like, look at all this stuff. This is incredible. And so since I've just always wanted to go into banking. When I was at IBM, I would visit the Banking Center of Excellence. I was trying to tell them about CUDA and NVIDIA. And I remember this very distinctly. Jennifer, I think was her name. Jennifer was the head of the Banking Center of Excellence at IBM. And I said, oh, Jennifer, this stuff's going to be hot. This was in 2006? No, 2009. Was when I graduated, and so soon after. And I said, this GPU stuff's going to take off. GPU is what we called it at the time, right? And she's like, Erik, thanks so much for telling me about this. This is going to try and compete with our mainframes, but we're good. We're fine. This is not a problem. She's kind of right. in a sense, because we're still using mainframes. But GPUs have definitely grown in use, and we've seen this proliferation. If you just even ignore crypto and all of that stuff, it's been fascinating, and NVIDIA has just been amazing to watch. And the CUDA library that I was so fascinated with, and parallel processing, this was something completely different from the CPUs that you grew up with, and you were, I got the latest Intel, this and that. Oh no, it was so cool.
Okay, so I'll make the distinction: fintech and finance.
Yeah.
And now you're in finance, but you are still dabbling in fintech, or maybe at least you are a hobbyist and a corporate type at the same time.
So I'm doing a disservice. Like I think what I see is that when Apple went to go do a credit card, they went to Goldman. They did not do their own and like build a bunch of stuff, sight unseen. They went to a bank, Goldman, and so too do you need that foundation for banking. But fintech for me is more of like the customer facing layer, Swish and Bankidea and these kinds of bits and pieces. But everybody wants to be seen as cool and have the latest idea of what's coming next. I think the challenge now is with crypto and Web3 and all of this stuff. What is all that going on there? But for me, finance and capital markets, so focusing on aktier or stocks, this for me I think is very important. And for me, this concept that you can, as someone off the street, buy access to a company and get that financial footing, whereas before maybe you had to work, to earn every dollar that you're ever going to get. Here you had a chance to get some equity. And growing up with the housing market being what it was in Silicon Valley, I knew I was never going to buy a house unless I was going to basically be indebted for the rest of my life. And maybe because of what happened with my family growing up, I just didn't feel very interested in taking on that kind of responsibility. Or I just didn't really want to borrow money at that level. Because I think a house, even 2005, we were looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it just didn't make any sense. I mean, it's crazy. I was living next to Netflix in an old apartment, and you were still paying $4,000 US a month, and that was the deal. They wanted to redo stuff and charge $6,000, and I said no, it's fine, just leave it like this.
But okay, so then we have capital markets, we have stock markets, and other kinds of markets where, when I think of fintech, I'm thinking just of modern services, I suppose. I guess that's the user-facing layer, if you will. But you've dabbled in AI and markets and that kind of thing. Is that something? One of the reasons I got started, that I really love computers now, is that it democratizes access to things that were inaccessible before. You can become a music producer now. You can work in theoretical physics, lots of stuff that you had to have access to, basically the most expensive labs and resources in the world before. Now anybody can work with. And it's a little bit the same with finance data. You can lab with that stuff at home and do advanced projects. Do you see that is where a lot of the innovation will be coming from? Is that something that you're sort of fascinated by, or do you think that it will be still for a long time led by the incumbents?
I guess when you say innovation and incumbents, I guess I'd have to ask maybe who you're speaking about, because I know here it's Nordnet, that's the one, and Avanza. These are like the two major.
Well, then I guess it has to be three tiers here, because you have the incumbents, the big Swedish banks, Nordea, Swedbank, and so
SEB
forth. Yeah. Then you have the internet native banks, let's say, that were sort of born afterwards, like Avanza and so forth. And then you have small companies that are sort of grassroots, and I don't even mean companies. I mean everything from the individual that can manage their own assets and Web3 type stuff.
Like these DeFi,
sure,
almost nomadic,
and that kind of
ideas
stuff.
of finance.
Yeah,
I have some friends, and they're big on that. And for me, it's a field I struggle to figure out how it will work. And this is why I think finance gets kind of stereotyped It's smoking jackets and a lot of fancy stuff, and actually for me it's all about saving and investing and protecting myself or people around me, and understanding this system. For me it was like the Federal Reserve was a kind of a revelation, how that worked, and the fact that we bake in inflation by design. But as far as incumbents, I think it's never been a better time to build in the space and try something new. It's fraught with a lot of maybe problems. We saw Terra Luna just last week collapse, I can say that, and UST along with it. And now they're going to do a new chain. And frankly, I don't understand. I think some of that is just, if you look at it from the classical capital market sense, it's almost like the penny stocks. And you're told, you can trade these, but you have to sign this thing, and you swear that you've done all the stuff, and when I fill in these forms that I understand this is risky. You don't really have to fill out so many forms with some of those other systems, and this is kind of where there's this argument, like we have to innovate by getting out of these systems of ways of doing, and in some ways that's how it's always been. I mean, Uber is one example where they would go to a jurisdiction and they would just start doing something, and whether that's good or bad, I'll leave that for another topic outside. But it's something of note that I've seen, that companies and startups will come in and they will just start doing something, and sometimes it's better and innovates and allows for things that couldn't have changed any other way. I'm talking about specifically the taxi medallion system in New York. That was a great example where it just seemed wrong. It doesn't make any sense that these few things kind of converge and control who can pick somebody up in a taxi. When I was in UC San Diego, I actually pitched like an Uber-like startup where on Facebook you would say, I'm going to go to LA. Is anybody else going to LA? And you would all come together as friends and ride in each other's cars. But little did I know, I wasn't ambitious enough that you're going to get in somebody else's car. You're going to go in someone else's car and go ride and use a phone app and control all of this. And it's been quite fascinating that what people now are accepting as, I'll get in somebody's car. I mean, he's got 5 stars, or it's just a very different market now.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things now that I think that blockchains and these kinds of things are really pushing it forward more than others with tokenizing real world assets, and the thing that most people associate with blockchains are intangible things like coins or whatnot. But you could tokenize land and sell carbon credits or whatever it is, and I think we're a bit away from that. But and I wonder if it's because the regulatory infrastructure that exists for classical financial markets is just too stifling for new ideas, new forms of risk, new forms of savings. Like, let's say, for example, that you wanted to save for your pension by buying land and saving it to increase biodiversity and capture carbon, something like that. And okay, so I'm a bank, and I'm like, I want to help you save for your pension. Let's create a pension fund that invests in land that way, and you can give me your money, and I'll save it for your pension. That investment vehicle, would be subject to the oversight of the financial regulators, and that maybe they would say, no, that's too risky or something like that. Do you think that that's like prudent? Is it stopping innovation? That's what I'm wondering, if we're going to see those kinds of cool new services for users from the traditional financial incumbents, or if we were going to find them from other directions.
I don't think it's. I don't think that's the issue, actually. I think what I saw a post once, and I think it snapped my attention that I kind of agree that this is a generational issue. There's so much gatekeeping in finance. There always was, and there always maybe will be. But now the new generation, they want to make they can't make sense of all this stock market stuff and up and down and sell. So they did what? They built their own system that they understand and that they can do their thing in. And Wall Street Bets is kind of one of these worlds that they've coalesced and organized in a way that's very different. And in some cases, it hits the nail on the head. And Melvin Capital is I don't know, maybe no more. And
tell for the people that are listening what Wall Street Bets is. I got my Diamond Hands prize for having been part of it since before the GME story. But what is Wall Street Bets?
So on Reddit, right, is this, if you don't know Reddit, just reddit.com, but in each of these subreddits, which are like sub-forums, there's different discussions. And Wall Street Bets was one of these places where now the hot thing is not, used to be, you'd Google on, I think it was seekingalpha.com and some of these other older sites, Yahoo Finance had some forums. But the new thing is now talking in Wall Street Bets or these other subreddits. And so they would coalesce and organize and get the diamond hands and all this stuff. And I'm a little bit older than maybe the average person who's posting in those forums, but it's very cool to see because they're just making it their own, because that's what they're capable of doing. They've organized.
You're saying it's cool to see. I think a lot of older people would say that it's garbage. It's just
What's
kids.
Garbage about
well, they're just standing there speculating, making fun. GME is not a real thing. It doesn't.
Was Melvin Capital speculating? Of course they're speculating. That's part of this is actually a question I wanted to have for you. Like, there's two sides. There's investing and speculation. We need both, I would say, to have markets. Otherwise, you'll just have a bunch of people huddling, and you'll never have a seller, and things will just kind of get weird from there, I would say.
I mean, I think it's hard to invest without making a gambit at all. If an investment is given, then everybody would go for it, and the markets would. I think this is one of the things that you and I were talking about trading and forex, and why I think forex is different than other markets.
I agree.
Trading coins, because if you compare it with something like wheat that has maybe not like an absolute intrinsic value, but it does have an intrinsic value in a sense that you can quantify what somebody would be willing to pay for it at any given moment, something like that. The forex markets have practically infinite liquidity. They don't have any intrinsic value. They have instant changes, between values.
Ticks.
Yeah.
The ticks are smooth.
Yeah, they're super smooth. And so, when I was working on AI on Forex markets, it's basically like working with white noise because it's so perfect.
Or Brownian motion.
Or Brownian motion or anything like that. Yeah, compared to stocks where, if a whale does something to a stock, it will affect the stock. And, the stock is related to product cycles, and the stock is related to the market. But Forex was very different. But you've dabbled in that sort of area. Where have you been focusing?
I always stuck to stocks because for me, Forex, I don't understand it, actually. And now that I live in Sweden, I really do need to understand it because the crown and the United States dollar exchange rate. But I think I always just knew intrinsically, just noticed. I just noticed that for me, companies, I knew companies. And if I'm buying NVIDIA, like that's just an example, I knew what I was getting into. When I buy the Japanese yen versus the British pound, I guess I'm buying some sort of thing, but it's still so abstract. But I know that the market is very liquid, and you want that liquidity when you're making these models, these kind of abstractions that you're trying to predict off of. When something is illiquid, this becomes actually like a sparse matrix. You're just kind of left really guessing what am I going to do to predict what's happening next, and you just don't have as much information. And some of the things that scared me about finance was the assumptions that go into financial models. A lot of Gaussian stuff is just kind of assumed, like, yeah, this is Gaussian, it's fine. And I'm like, why? I don't. In no other part of my scientific, learning was I just told, oh yeah, this is how it goes, and just accept it. Mm-hmm. But in financial modeling, it's just kind of how it's been, and sometimes that works. But when it doesn't work, one of my favorites is LTCM, Long-Term Capital Management. They were Nobel Prize winners, and MIT, this, that, and the other thing. Geniuses, legitimate geniuses who wrote papers that everybody was citing. Black-Scholes, many brilliant things came out of them. They went belly up. they're gone. They were picking up pennies in front of a steamroller, is the saying. And I'm much more on the side of value investing. I know we could go down many different roads in finance, but I think the reason I'm into stocks is because it's easier to value for me, and value investing is for me makes sense.
But let me ask you one question there, because there's a pretty clear dichotomy to me. You were saying before the difference between saving and investing and speculating. If you have an engine that's supposed to regulate the market and oversee it to make it predictable, is that at odds with those two sides of the coin? I
guess I wouldn't say makes it predictable, but it helps you. So Forex, having a smooth tick, the more data you have, kind of the easier it can be to say what's going to happen next. Whereas if you have like a jump step, you might have more difficulty. And this is what happens in very illiquid stocks. And that's usually where you can make a lot of money when you have illiquid assets, but you have to have diamond hands, so to speak. Whereas if you have a liquid market, you can build up a position easily. You can exit that position easily. Usually the easy part is to build a position and have holdings. But if you're trying to get out of a stock and suddenly that market has disappeared, like take Terra Luna, who's buying this thing? No one's buying it, so the price will just collapse. And this is the stuff that I get very interested in, the psychology of the markets. And that's, I think, the edge that you're trying to build, is you're trying to understand the psychology of something that is not a human. It's a market, and it's a lot of the participants. But it's not about making it more predictable. Very
human-like, right? Isn't that the most annoying part that I think
fear
a lot of people...
and greed, yeah. No, but I think it's the most interesting, though. If it was so easy, I don't think I would be into it. I hate to paraphrase it, but I felt like a lot of what I did in the last 10 years was plumbing. A lot of plumbing. Just these bits are not flowing this way that we want. These bits need to go this way, that way. And it's just okay, the zeros and ones need to go this way or that way, or use this API, and everything's working great. But when I got into computer science, one of my biggest disappointments was it didn't feel like natural science. With natural science, you had mysteries, and there still are mysteries, and maybe this is why I'm not such a super focused master's degree computer scientist. But for me, the interesting things were like how do we have all these naturally occurring patterns in nature? And some of the most interesting people I met in the sciences were trying to use biology to build things. So they were taking the patterns from nature that were strong, and then incorporating that into their 3D printed materials, patterns and things to increase rigidity or get a property that they were after. I find that stuff to be kind of at the core of like, what is all this stuff? Nature and physics and the universe, and that's why markets maybe are one of those things. Like it's its own entity. And this is why AI in the markets has always been at the very forefront. They've had a lot of money poured in, and we still haven't figured it out. We still don't know. You can't predict everything.
When I look at these, the alpha sources and stuff, they don't exist anymore. But I've been looking through some of the newer books that talk about the different analytical ways of looking at markets. They still are very classical statistical approaches. There is like a brief mention of neural networks, and they're like, yeah, it might work, but here's my super advanced moving average. Or something like that.
Or signal.
Some super, I wouldn't say convoluted. They're all just different ways of doing the moving average, drawing lines
Good
between
old moving
them.
Average.
But more or less sophisticated, right? So this is like a really sophisticated version of it that uses the square root of some inverse of some, different parts of the signal. But I have never seen. I've seen people from finance try ML, but I haven't seen as many computer scientists use things like WaveNet or other signal processing approaches.
That's true.
In finance, or if they're using it, at least they're not writing about it a lot publicly. So
they're busy making money, maybe. I don't know.
that must be it.
I scoured the West Coast quant scene. So there was after university, I was in San Francisco and going to these meetups for mathematicians, and it was all about CUDA and quants and AI at the time, which was just using CUDA to run processing stuff faster. There was no talk of neural nets at all. And I would try to decipher, what are these guys talking about? What are these people talking about? And it was, as you say, a lot of
CUDA
statistical, a lot of calculate the Black-Scholes faster and with more data so that you can just buy that stock or short this or synthesize that. And part of the reason that I get so fascinated with all of this is that it reminds me of the stuff my father would do. So we would talk about Kalman filtering and Fourier transforms. These are the things I heard as a kid growing up. He was like, check this out, Eric, there's a Fourier transform. And I'm like, yeah, Dad, whatever. I'm not going to be like you. And now I'm looking back like, maybe I should have paid attention when I was sitting on his lap for all those years. But, it's the interconnects between all the different disciplines and who should use what when. I don't try to prescribe, like this tabular data stuff where we say neural nets don't belong on tabular data, and tabular data runs, the world. And I said, so you're going to build your autonomous vehicle on spreadsheets?
Yeah.
No, of course not. So where's AI, in the mix between the classical statistical approaches and then when you need to actually step up and go to neural nets? It's interesting.
You've made a big transition from, I think, is a more ML engineering, or rather an engineering role, with all your analytics background into something that is more AI focused. And you've said now that you've had an AI interest for a long time. Has this interest it accelerated when you came to Sweden? Was it very given, or was it something that you pursued explicitly?
I hate to say it, but when I came to Sweden, and maybe it was the firm that I was at, I felt like I was back in time in some ways, because the market here is all about Windows. And maybe this was my bias coming from Silicon Valley. I know you're a big Windows guy, so I'm being careful here. But I had moved on from Windows, and I was fully in Linux, fully on like a Mac. You're usually going to have a Mac, and you're going to build all your stuff on there. And it was a big transition. And I use Windows now. It's not a big deal. I don't mind. We've got the tools with Linux inside. But I felt like I was fighting an attitude when I would talk about data. And not even AI, but just talking about, let's measure this stuff. I was in a team. We had a set of microservices that were, doing a bunch of automation to run this truck in the automotive field. And we would put this truck in the matrix and drive it down the road and then measure a bunch of things. And I said, your services keep, crashing. Let's put some Kibana dashboard so I can see the logs and we can see together as a team, where is the crash? Where is the problem? And they kind of were like, I don't get it. They were busy. I get it. Like, I was brought there because we needed to get to work. And so I just did it. And I loved that. Like, having the freedom to just say, okay, nobody understands the value I'm trying to say, but I've got the freedom to go build what I'm talking about. And I use this tool, shout out to Juju. I know there's a lot of tools out there, but I was lucky enough to be in a part of the company where I talked to the IT team and I said, IT team, how do you instantiate servers in this company? Because I'm brand new and I don't know anything. And he said, well, we don't really have anything for you. You could use Ansible, you could do this, or you could use Juju. And I'd never heard of Juju in my life. And it turned out it was from Canonical, people of Ubuntu fame.
Was that because they had OpenStack, or why did they let you use Juju?
They didn't, well, they were, we were so isolated from them. We were in research and development, so we were in a different world. But they were telling us what they were kind of using under the hood in their area. And it turned out they were doing a lot of deep learning stuff, and they had it on-prem. So it was really cool to see. And but they were using Juju and Metal as a service to instantiate private clouds to run Slurm and do HPC work.
They were using Slurm?
They were using Slurm, nice. And they Jujufied. They wrote a Juju charm to instantiate and configure Slurm across a whole bunch of stuff.
No Kubernetes?
No kubes. I know. It's very different. And I loved that. I loved seeing that they weren't afraid to go against the common knowledge that, of course, you must Kubernetes.
Yeah.
Because they just wanted to get the work done. And Kubernetes is fantastic, but it's complicated. And so I said, okay, Juju, okay. And I looked at what we had. We had some VMware ESXi servers. Now, I had used VMware in my home back in California because it was free and you could just install it and start doing some virtual machines. And I started using Juju to instantiate stuff in that virtual machine. Changed the game, and we were instantiating an ELK stack. I will never forget this. I did Juju deploy ELK and went to lunch. And I thought, okay, I've never seen something work. You know, whenever you see a new tool and you try it out and you read the README and you're like, all right, this is not going to work, but I'll just do this and I'll come back. So about 40 minutes went by and I came back from my thing. It was done, configured. I pushed data in and I saw the data coming out of the Kibana dashboard, and it was like, I didn't need Amazon.
Sometimes when you do that, you're like, something has to be wrong.
This can't be working.
This is not actually working.
This is not actually happening. It happened. And from there, I have used Juju ever since to instantiate all my private projects. So I do a lot of stuff now where I'm trying to learn something. I really heavily try to contribute to that ecosystem because it was just so fantastic. I could never have instantiated Dashboard. There was a Logstash. So we pushed the logs in from multiple servers, sliced and diced it, pushed it into Kibana via, what was it? Elasticsearch. So it was a game changer. This open source world is always come to me and given me so much, and so I try to contribute back, and I've got to contribute to like fun projects like TensorFlow, just the documentation, but still very important for me because like I feel like a lot of documentation in computer science areas, you come to these Git repos, you read it, and you try to follow it, and it just never works. And this was actually the biggest challenge for me. I remember I studied all this machine learning stuff, did all the Coursera courses, but it wasn't enough. And I wanted to do the hardest thing, which at the time was object detection. And I said, okay, I'm not going to be able to build this from scratch because I just don't have a PhD person next to me. What's out there in the open source world? So I found a project that was kind of dying, and it was someone who's now at Microsoft, but he was, I think, up in Washington, and he had open sourced this faster RCNN implementation. I'm going to open source this later this summer now because it's been a long time, and I think it's fine. It's not used anywhere in production. But I got that thing working, and now I have it working on streaming data. So I can have streaming Bloomberg and detect faces in this streaming Bloomberg, TV stuff. And this is just the beginning, and this is all from scratch. There's no public cloud around me. It's just all stuff in the,
your machine at
home. On the machine at home, and with the software from the internet. That is the powerful stuff. You were talking about democratizing, and I completely agree. Like that just wouldn't have happened years ago. Facial detection, streaming. I think I'm getting 15 frames a second. It's not the greatest. Mm-hmm. We're not going to drive down the street with it like at Tesla, but it's amazing to see that all this stuff is there. And I had to refactor a lot of it. There was a lot of cruft because a lot of these projects, they're more about benchmarks for white papers.
Yeah.
But then to productionalize it, to make it readable, to use it for real projects. So I gave this talk in Sweden not too long ago, about 2.5 years ago. And I made up this thing called Smoothie Verket, where we have a bunch of bulk fruits and vegetables, and I need to sort them very quickly using AI. It's a very contrived example, but it was more about just showing that we can do this stuff, and we can do it in open source, and you don't need to go to university. These university, programs are fantastic for meeting people and getting those connections to the right industry partners to go further in your career. But some of this stuff is just out there.
But let's circle in on this example that you gave here, where I get the sense that a lot of projects made in academia are not. I get the sense they're made for writing a paper, like you said, right? Sure. So they'll write a piece of software, and it's documented so the people in the team can read it.
You hope.
Sometimes, if it's like 2 or 3 people, it's not documented, right? It's just meant to run the experiment, and a lot of these people then go on into the workforce and expect to, produce great results at big companies. Mm. Have you seen that sort of shift not working as well, where, we have these mature software engineering principles that we try to stick to, Git and so on, and that clashing with the sort of everything is an experiment mindset?
This is, for me, like the biggest challenge in data science today is this clash of the Titan cultures, because we want our production models. We want to run in production, and we want to do great things. but that's not how you write the models. They're in notebooks now all the time.
You're saying notebooks is not a production grade setup?
It can be. If depends on the use case. Sometimes you want to just do a quick one-off and show it to someone over their shoulder and say, here's the numbers. That's production. That can be okay. But this is the biggest challenge, and I haven't seen it move very quickly. I think I was most impressed lately with the things I've seen with Databricks, to be quite honest. I want to see, more towards that, where they have a notebook set up, but it's as close to Python as they could make it without doing what is in these Julia notebooks, Jupyter notebooks, excuse me, where you look at that stuff in Git and it's all JSON, and I can't make heads or tails of whatever that is. But at least in Databricks, I can basically read its Python, and if we have to, we can transform it and run tests. But it's a nascent stage. Like, I know now Nutter is this framework for running unit tests in Databricks that just came out. So
unit tests, what's that?
Ooh. This is the thing, like testing and coming from
code
IBM.
Coverage.
Code coverage.
What?
It's always 100%. I mean, these are cultural things that when you came from the engineering backgrounds of some of these companies that we're building on top of, we had to do those things in Silicon Valley. But now in the, I guess the next stage, you don't always need these things, or they're not important, and you don't feel the pain of it till later when someone maybe made a model, wrote it, PhD, crazy, whiz bang boom, but then they move on to the next thing and they're gone. And you have to decipher what the stuff is.
And the sort of, like, is there room for that kind of stuff in big companies now?
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, IBM is a huge company, and we have many talented PhDs. We have PhDs at Swedbank.
No, I mean, like a retailer. Let's take a retailer that's looking to get really into ML.
Ooh. I mean, it depends. When you say retailer, I mean like...
I just mean like not a data company, or at least not what you traditionally think of as a data company, but now it's like, okay, we want to leverage AI to accelerate and make us more efficient, make us better, offer better products. We need to adopt some best practices. Software engineering best practices. Or, okay, and that's also a question, like, is software engineering best practice the same as AI best practice? It hasn't. I don't think it has been. Is it going in that direction? Like code coverage, version control of data, all that kind of stuff. How important is that even?
I feel like code coverage, I wonder sometimes, what are we doing? Because in one of the places, wasn't in Sweden, but in one of the places I worked, you have to have 90% code coverage in order to push to master. And you see just stuff will get covered.
The reason I'm asking is, but imagine
no ops.
Right.
Yeah.
But so, like, I'm a manager at the retailer, and I'm trying to think, like, what kind of technical prerequisites need to be in place for me to do AI effectively? Or efficiently, rather. I have the trade-off here. I'm trying to think: should I move fast, or should I and build a technical debt, or should I set things up to be good? And there's some kind of balance to be struck there.
Definitely.
Or what do you think?
I think it's dependent on where are you relative to your peers, so to speak, in your domain, or are you trying to go into I would say first, no, you don't need a PhD, but you probably need an advisor to someone who's done this before, who has built up this competence in a company, who's been there, done that, and look at the situation, because sometimes you have a lot of data, but it's not all connected. It's dispersed, siloed, or whatever. In other places, you have a ton of data or maybe no data. You have to take an assessment of kind of where are you, and then where do you want to go as a company. I think this is the place where I'm at now, is that I want to see what is the ambitions, what are we wanting to build with AI as people, and we want it to be ethical and fair and transparent and traceable. How do we get there? But what are we building towards? And it's not always clear cut depending on the industry, because some industries I feel are going to drastically transform soon, and others maybe have a moat, or they have less incentive to change right away. That's I think it's a very hard question without knowing like which domain you would want to pick.
But you've been pretty outspoken in there being best practices. You mentioned, for example, when you started at the automotive company that you were introducing Git. You're talking about the way services should set up, and now with ML there's also, ways of doing things that are becoming more popular because they tend to work well. I mean, are those necessary things? Are you championing them? And
I would champion Git anytime, but for all the right things. And the problem can be if you don't have any buy-in. So when you say I introduced Git, I'll clarify. I did not introduce Git at that client. There was a great team in the IT department, and they had actually been doing the due diligence to bring GitLab in particular in. I'll share the story. We were on Perforce, which is another code versioning tool. It's perfectly fine, used a lot in the gaming industry. But in order to step up into open source code and leverage certain things, we had to go to Git. And this was kind of like, what is this stuff? What is all of this? And so it depends what you want to do as an industry. And for this particular client, they definitely needed to go that route and whole hog. Get into Git, use automation, Git SecOps, whatever you want to call it, DevOps, and take it from people who've already been there and built all that stuff. No, I did not introduce GitLab.
Is that a strategic move? Or is that something that you would expect management to say, okay, we're modernizing, we're moving to this? Or is that something that IT would be like, okay, it's time to upgrade, guys?
They had to get buy-in from the business. And I think what pushed them, quite frankly, was the autonomous stuff. Because once they started realizing we want to build this competence and build up this know-how, what are all the tools you're working with?
Oh, that's awesome. That's
all
a really good...
It came up from organic. And this is something I always credit them with, was like they listened. But it took a while. But it takes it's a big company to
could they have gone to autonomous without doing these technical upgrades?
It wasn't even upgrades. I mean, I would say like it was like a life change, mind shift. Going to microservices is not trivial, and going to Git and what is that? You can go to Git and nothing will change if you don't change your mindset about how you're approaching your code and your models. That could be another thing, but. No, I really was impressed once the shift started to happen. They've even been open sourcing code out into the public, and they called it first inner sourcing. So you would start with your inner source code, and it was about opening up just to each other. Here's what we've been working on in this silo and that silo, and it was fascinating to see it, the sharing and the collaboration that you really do coming from a software background. You want to see that in any company that you're working in, that openness and ability to go and help, because there were a lot of teams that had never used AWS, and they were now being asked to go to the cloud. And I had my own opinions about some of those people, because they said everything will go to the cloud. And I said, no, not everything. But most things that should go to the cloud, they will go to the cloud, the public cloud. But there's going to be some things, some crown jewels maybe, and those won't go to the public cloud ever. And that's why you have these hybrid situations popping up. And AI is sometimes, it's about setting up the experiment, but the training happens on-prem because it's cheaper. It's just much cheaper.
Well, I mean, but to finish off your talk about version control, I think it's easy to trivialize it and say, yeah, we have Git. But it's not about having the tool itself. I mean, Git is a philosophy of collaboration.
Yes.
How do two people work on the same piece of code at the same time? What is the proper process of going from an experiment into something that is validated as good, put into production, and all that kind of stuff? So it's really about the process, and the tool sort of codifies a good practice. But if you don't put that practice into good use,
the mix,
yeah,
it's like the data swamp. If you don't curate your data and have good practices, of course you'll have a data swamp at the end of a couple of years. And it's so too with the code. I've got plenty of stories of people using and not using code versioning tools, and what happens when that. We have these in university. You learn these lessons in university when you try to email something, the email lost, and now your code, you've got to write it all over again. you don't want to repeat that when you're on the job. And so you've just learned the hygiene. At least I'm very methodical when I write code, that I always want to start with Git and in version control. But I've learned that actually there's a culture where that's not so important, and that's okay too. And data science can be not so much about we need to have the code under Git version control. That may not be so important. And it's been a challenge for me actually coming into data science after all these years. To see that, sometimes the notebook, that's all you need. And I have to learn to live with that, because sometimes you're not building a web app to serve this model. You just need to, have something that to show someone over their shoulder. Here's some results. Okay, delete, go, move on. Well, it's a balance.
Yeah, and that does happen a lot, and then it sort of stops there, and then that's no good. But then the opposite can also happen where you're just stuck in processes and you're not having this rapid iteration that you do need to get going with AI. I am curious maybe to use this as a segue to explore your other sort of interests that are tangentially related to computers, because you are into music and other things. And I always find that there's a really nice crossover of my computer interest into everything else that I want to do. And so, you're interested in finance, in music, and other things. Do you feel that there's a nice crossover of your interests?
I think music and electronic music has been something of a mystery. It feels like so I DJ, and I know that sounds pretty stereotyped. There's a lot of I think for me, beauty in music, and the fact that it can be digitized is something that's kind of curious to me. Like, how did this even work? We've just got these zeros and ones, and it's kind of like very strange for me how we can take those and build something that gives you emotion, elicits some sort of emotion. And for me, I was getting into music more and more, and I think it's for me, this passion project of trying to put things together that don't usually belong, like being half Mexican. I've listened to a lot of stuff that's coming from like the Spanish-speaking world, and I wish there was more Spanish-speaking media to consume. And I've seen more and more that there's other places, like K-pop has really taken off in the last 10 years, and I got really into Japanese music, Korean music, started listening to a lot of Swedish stuff. There were artists I did not know were Swedish, so I thought like Robin. I didn't know. I mean, it sounds very stupid now that I'm here and I live here and I see how there are these superstars of Sweden. But at the time, I thought Tove Lo, she's just from California. It just sounds like she's from the States. And it's been so cool to see Sweden's musical prowess over time, and to be a part of that, and to walk the halls and see all the different artist labels down the street, in different corners of Stockholm, even to just get to be a part of it. But music is something. It's a different part of the brain, but I've studied musical theory now a little bit, and you learn the structure. And this is my challenge now to try to figure out how can you code music, because it's kind of a code in a way, but using different tools, different.
Generative music type stuff.
Sorry?
Have you looked into generative type music?
Yes. So, I mean, my weapon of choice is Ableton Live, and I had worked with it a bunch, and it's a lot of looping and synths and plugging stuff in, and I think that's a lot of fun. I don't think I'll ever make a career out of my music, but it's just about having fun and meeting new people, and I think it's very inspiring actually to see what others are into, because I think part of the pandemic has been hard is getting to know people, and so one of the things I'll ask is like, oh, what do you listen to? What music are you into? Because usually it's been a challenge to work on really hard problems with people you'd never see. And so I just try to get some tips. There's a lot of Bollywood stuff out there that I got into. There's probably some videos of me dancing somewhere on YouTube to some tracks. And, there's music from all over the place. And I think that's one of the things that connects us along with food. It's something deeper, but there is a code to music. But I don't think I've learned it at all. It's just something that's for fun.
I think there's something that makes people nervous about the crossroads of AI and humanity, you know, AI making art or AI being used for something that's traditionally a very human endeavor. And I think we see that in every place. That's why people are so nervous about AI in healthcare, because they feel that that's very quintessentially human. What are your thoughts on AI augmenting? Can they be used for things that we expect to be human? Can they be used to design clothing, to write music, to act as advisors, as helpers, as synthetic humans, I guess?
I think synthetic humans very dangerous, and I. The longer I work in this field, the more I get worried, because I see how fast things are happening, and having lived in the Valley and watched social media go from 0 to 100 real quick, AI could go even faster. And it's already being utilized in many ways for, you know, recommending a film on Netflix or what have you. But when it starts to do even more, it's our choice as humanity. How do we want to use this tool? And I get afraid that out of desperation or a need for some sort of profit, we will do something that maybe won't be so optimal, but only in hindsight. But for me, AI, it's a powerful tool, but it's just a tool at the end of the day. And if we have to understand it, build stuff with it, that's great. But I don't think it can be us, humans. I think we have to work with it, but we can't make us from it, if that makes sense. It's hard to explain for me because I'll know it when I see it, but this uncanny valley stuff, I've watched all the sci-fi, you know, series, Black Mirror, and all of these other things, and they're cautionary tales about what happens if we take things to the nth degree. And of course, those will be having their pitfalls. But right now, let's just take music for example. I don't like most of the music that comes out of the AI circle. To be quite perfectly frank, I just don't think it's that good. I wouldn't listen to it.
Do you like most music written by most people?
I guess I need to listen more, but no, I'm not that picky. I mean, I'm not that picky with I like a lot of different things, but when I listen to some of the stuff coming out of the conferences, everyone's very fascinated. Like, look at this! It's copied, you know, Beethoven and done, you know, a mashup of these things, and I know that technically speaking, these are very hard things that they've, I guess, done. But I just don't want to listen to it. It's just not there yet. So I know you've talked about gent, this metal genre that might be more analogous to having an AI that's going to build stuff, and you'll be like, yeah, this works. But not so much for me. Like music, for instance, it's about the soul, and that's so intrinsically, untangibly, you know, it's hard to describe. But for me, I guess, I'm just kind of floundering here. But this is a hard problem to say when I hear music from an AI and I didn't know it, will I detect that? And is it a problem?
Well, you know that meme where the guy is trying to jump up 10 steps at the same time instead of going each little step, and there are sort of steps. I mean, instead of learning the math all the way up to calculus or something, you just jump straight to calculus. And in this case, by jumping straight to AI, writing an entire song, waveform complete and everything, maybe that's too big a step because, we use PC augmentation to make stuff better now. You might write, when you press your keyboard on the keyboard, the synthesizer will add granularity, waves, and other stuff, and you're like, wow. And then you don't think, oh, the PC did that. You say, I did that. I picked the patch. Mm-hmm. I did this. And maybe there's a more mild form of AI. In fact, I was working on one last week. I was chatting with a guy on Facebook that had trained a WaveNet to imitate certain guitar amplifiers. And then, you can make modifications to it. And so you could say that the AI is writing that part of the music. And we fed it some data, but there's at least right now there's a collaboration.
Featuring AI.
So I guess we need to give some credit there where it's due.
Definitely.
So we're probably not there where the AI is writing stuff that's super compelling, at least not outside of gent music that's supposed to sound robotic.
Gotta start somewhere.
Yeah.
And not a bad place to start, as I've understood.
Yeah. But I wonder, like, like with football, for example, the fact that Zlatan is better than most people at football doesn't take away from the enjoyment that any one individual has in it. So I don't know if we have to feel threatened whether or not an AI could produce art or music or anything like that.
I guess if we go straight to it, like the game of Go, this is where people get scared, because I think there was an idea that the world champions of Go would trounce, the AlphaGo, AlphaZero, whatever, and it just didn't happen. It was quite the opposite, I guess. Yeah. But we learned moves from the AI in that moment, and the world champion said, this is a fascinating move. So we have much to learn maybe from AI in certain cases, but yeah, we have to build up, and I hope we just focus on those good problems that we can build upon.
So Henrik is online. So hi, Henrik.
Oh, hey.
Hey, yeah. So
Tjena.
Yeah, exactly. He has been following the entire time and asking some question. And I would just ask the last one, which was a little bit more related to something that we have seen and observed during these 68 episodes, or should we say 69? If that was the.
No comment.
And that is that basically many of the people working with data science, machine learning, and etc., they have a passion project as well on the side. Ooh. And so the question from Henrik, and I think it's a real good one, is actually how much the passion project has importance in the way how you fuel innovation. Right?
I love that. That is something I definitely would agree with Henrik on. What do you think?
It's everything. Harnessing passion, I think, is something that So I've been in the lockdown, in the pandemic lockdown, and in Sweden in general, I think a lot of good stuff comes from the cold winters. That this is coding weather, basically, as I see it, and I'm very introverted, so I'm all good. Passion projects can turn into products, and those products can turn into companies. And I think that type of innovation, you have to cultivate it. And I've heard many stories of companies that they have an innovation department, but it's not going to come from a department. It has to come from almost like a culture and an openness and a collaboration and a willingness to take risks. And at a big company, that can be very difficult to do. But that's why you do startups. Maybe sometimes you feel so passionately about something, and you just take that risk. And one of the things I credit Sweden is that you have this system of a safety net to take bigger risks. If you leave and you have no healthcare in the United States, I took a big risk. I did a startup for a while by myself. Didn't have any healthcare. Didn't have really anything. But here you have a safety net, and that should encourage you to take more risks, actually.
It's even better than that. Yeah. You know that if you work for someone and you have a passion project and you want to start a startup, you can go to your employer and say like, hey, I want to take 6 months off. I'm going to start to do my company, right?
Exactly.
Right, and basically, legally, you are entitled to do that, and they will keep your seat until you come back.
It's amazing.
Right.
It is. It's amazing.
That is how you.
I think a lot of people would be like, "No, that would be abused." But I don't see that kind of thing happening.
I have not seen it yet. I've seen, if anything, awesome feedback, and they learn something. Even if the startup failed, you're still going to learn so much. You're going to bring that passion back to the company and do stuff with them. Hopefully, as I would say, if you didn't fail upwards, you're basically just going to keep building together. And there's not a lot of people in Sweden. I think we're about 10 million. Right. So everybody's got to be switched on as much as possible. And this is one of the difficulties I've seen is that innovation can get squelched very easily in a permissionless environment. You're not allowed to do anything. So you're just kind of, okay, I've got my lane and I do what I'm told. And innovation usually is where you kind of do something you're not supposed to do. And there's a give and a take there, and the law and everything. But I think what I've seen is a lot of the great stuff comes when you're given a bit of leeway to go on your own way. And this 6 month sabbatical, it's awesome. It's awesome.
Does that mean that you have passion projects on this, like hobby projects that you work
Always.
on the side?
Always. I'm fueled by, this curiosity for what's going on in ML, what's going on next, what's coming after Python. This is what I always wonder. I know a lot of people will be like, oh, come on, like this is going to be around for a long time, and it will be. But my curiosity is there has to be more. There's always something cooking, and I look at also Web3 and I think this culture that's come up, and some of it's bad, some of it's good, but this is their time to build stuff and using cryptography to organize ourselves in new fascinating ways. I just find it awesome, and I'm using some of this stuff. I know the Linux kernel just got WireGuard not too long ago into
nice.
kernel space, which if you are not aware, that's a really amazing thing. Usually, if you have projects outside the user land, I guess that's less efficient. And the computer scientist in me is like, well, now it's even you can run even more of this stuff and use less battery. It's more efficient from an environmental perspective. I think there's just so many interesting things going on, and I just encourage more talking and collaborating, and that's how the great projects really can come to the fore, and great companies that can come to the fore and build what comes next.
Web3 is one of those fun technologies where it's easy to dismiss, and I always think it's good to sort of question yourselves and think, is there something I'm missing? When Web 2.0 came out, there were these ideas of asynchronous communications with web pages, and there was this thing called Comet, where to me at the time it was obvious that you might want to have asynchronous messages from the web page, and these were static web pages at the time. And I was thinking, cool, if somebody posts something, you might want to get an update or something. But why would you want to send something asynchronously to a website? What are you going to send to a website? I don't get it. Who knows, right? That seems totally useless. And obviously it's not useless, right? And I think even the way that people conceptualize the internet now, we don't think of the internet as websites. We think of it as this amorphous communication medium, the cloud, and so on. And people are probably not as savvy as to what AI is in the same way as to what the internet is. I don't think anybody knows what routing protocols are used to send the packets around the internet.
No.
They know how the internet works more on a conceptual level, in a just a good enough way that they can build products and be clever and innovative.
They don't know the network layers, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Just the first couple
physical,
of layers. Right.
Application.
Checksumming and everything.
The CCNA didn't do me wrong, yeah.
Right.
But
like, how are you going to be creative with AI or with Web3 or any of that stuff if you can't talk about it as casually as we talk about the internet today?
I think it's good to throw away Web3, actually. Throw away Web3 because it's been, maybe it's not tarnished, but it's talking about something I don't understand.
Yeah, but Web 2 was pretty crappy when people were talking about it, you have to admit.
I never used that term either, and I've heard this industry 4.0. So I have some friends, they're very fancy, they're working in the lawyer space, and they're making a lot of money doing stuff, and they say, Erik, it's all about industry 4.0 now. And I'm like, what was 2, 3, and what?
Let's go, yeah.
And so there's a culture. This is a culture of framing what's going on to give you an idea of this world and have a milestone, I guess. And I've just not lived in that space. I've kind of been in my bubble of computer science and just seeing, what's going on from my point of view. But Web 2, I still don't even know. I guess Web 2 was like when we're the product? Is that it?
No, Web 2 was, first you had static websites.
Right.
Just a page.
HTML, CSS.
Yeah, and now you have a website where you send stuff to the page and the page updates and sends stuff, like LinkedIn. LinkedIn is back and forth. You're connected to the website.
Okay.
It was just the gurus were talking about Web 2.0 long before. And then, it actually took a while to make anything meaningful. And so now Web 3 is out, and the first thing people come up with are monkey NFTs. And you're like, oh my God, yeah, this is the best you can come up with. But
it could be the greatest thing. I don't know. Like, I know they're launching their universe, their metaverse.
Yeah.
The other world, I think it's called. But it's early days. It feels cliche, but it is early, and things will maybe crash and burn. But we will have this technology after that, and what we do with it is up to us.
Yeah.
And for me, what I love about the web and coding is it can be up to you what you want to do with it, and with AI. In certain aspects, it can be dangerous. I've had hesitations of open sourcing certain things. And I've heard others, like they solved a couple of problems in poker, and they were told, don't open source this because it's going to ruin online, gambling. And I think we're at that place where we are deciding what we acceptably put out into the world for others to use or not use. And this is kind of, it's a cultural thing. What do you want to put out there and be known for? But it's for Web3, I think maybe I see it differently, because for me it's about cryptography and privacy and getting away from using AWS. I know there's a lot of vendors that maybe watch, but I feel like I've never been able to afford the public cloud companies until recently, now that I'm a little bit more established. But when I was building stuff, I had to stay off of the public clouds because it was just money out the window, because I had my shoestring, bootstrapping budget.
Yeah.
And with Web3, now you might not even have to go use AWS to build some sort of data platform. So the passion projects I'm working in, it's focusing on data science and open sourcing or opening up these capabilities that, because I've worked in the industry now for a couple of years, data lakes, data warehouses, all of these capabilities, these are all built on open source technologies and stacks. We can get a cloud publicly, privately, whichever you want, instantiate those things, pour data in, and that data is open source as well, usually, or it's it starts that way, and then you start to also make your own data. Nothing's going to stop you from building whatever you want. And that's the exciting thing that I guess Web3 gets right, is like, it's taking things on in a new form, a new fashion. And that energy is very palpable for me to see the community and all the discords and the chats and stuff. It can be used for scams, and a lot of this stuff is maybe going to go with the wind. But just have fun with it, and don't lose a lot of money, and I think if and when I have kids, I'm going to look back on these times and these capabilities and say, you can take this stuff, this code, this data, these techniques, do what you want. What do you want to do? Yeah. And that's going to be the interesting thing, to see what do they want to build? What do they want to solve? We have a lot of problems. I remember growing up and being told, we're going to solve climate change, and we're going to solve... Oh, yeah, everything's kind of kick the can down the road, and sometimes you have to put a foot down and say, we got to do something. And this is the other thing, is for me, opening up these data science capabilities so that we can collaborate and bring people in to work on those hard problems. And that's something I want to encourage
people to talk about more. A lot of times when you hear people talking about AI ethics, I want to invite people to talk about AI ethics from what responsibility do you have to make the world a better place? Not who's going to get a loan at the bank, or how are we going to increase click-through on this website to get people to buy another pair of jeans or something. Like, the AI ethics is, how can I make the world a more equitable place, or save the environment and that kind of stuff? What am I actually contributing to with my skills? Well
said, yeah. I think it's too easy to pontificate on what it could be, and talking about, the stereotype is like the trolley problem. And we've all probably heard this thing too many times now. But I think for me, the environment, that's an easy one, because we're using so much computational resources to train these models. Foundational models probably take, I don't even know how much, power, compute, resources. And I know I'm going to hear some laughs, but I'm trying to push, to use these libraries that measure, when you train your model, how much CO2 are you generating?
Are you trying to say you should use maybe like a programming language that uses fewer resources? What
could that be? Name some names.
If there only were such a language. If there only
were such a language that was efficient.
Okay, cool. So, well, that's nice. We have environment in common, and see that it's sort of as an ethical problem.
We got one planet until we get to Mars, I guess. And I think there's that debate of, do we stay or do we go? And I'm definitely on the let's stay, because, come on, Mars, as great as Mars looks, I think our planet looks pretty cool too. It's
there's room for a difference of opinion. I'll send you messages. It's only an
we'll do it in the
delay.
After work. The after work. We'll talk.
Right. You wwon't be able to get it past that annoying delay when we're playing the lag when we're playing Counter-Strike or whatever.
Lag. No, I have to blame the lag because you're going to frag me like nobody's business.
Right.
I'm sure.
Maybe AI can solve that. Who knows?
auto aim. I don't know.
So what's next then? So I think we've decided that Web3 is perhaps substantial, not necessarily in the way it's marketed today. Skål to that. And well, let's clarify one thing.
Sure.
Is AI, is deep learning and the direction it's headed in, is that hype or not? What's your opinion?
Definitely not hype. Look at when I look at the things that deep learning had to do, there's a lot of, I think, debate about tabular data and the business analytics dashboarding world. But when you start stepping into driving down a road, processing images at, let's say, 30 frames per second, and doing it to keep that truck or that car on the road, you're using neural nets. And until we get something better, this is the way that they're building it. And I also see like DAL-E, and these other big foundational models coming in, doing things that I've never seen a spreadsheet or a model from a spreadsheet alone do. And for me, so I have to say I focused on image processing, and that was a very conscientious effort because I knew NLP takes a lot of computational resources, which I can't afford, and it takes massive data sets, which I also couldn't afford to hold on my machine. So I focused on image processing to kind of understand neural nets, and so that's why I keep harping on autonomous driving. But if you're going to build something for AR or any of these VR technologies, it's hard. I don't see Tesla, talking about anything else but their neural nets and building, new hardware in the car to run those inferences faster than neural networks.
How does this tie back to your average retailer? Because we're saying that AI is going to change everything. Is it going to change average retailers? Is it going to change average banks?
Change comes to all industries. Software is eating the world. That's, I think, my feeling, and it has been for quite a while. And I think each industry has a moat to protect itself from these kinds of changes. But Uber was one example that I brought, and I'll bring it back, that they did some things that I think changed how we think of ride sharing. And now we have the potential for autonomous taxis and all this stuff that might come. It's only a matter of time, I think, where something will come for those business moats and test the waters, test the moat. And you better be ready. And it doesn't mean you have to build everything yourself. It could mean that you just need to acquire something. And I see that a lot, where you either you build it yourself or you buy it. So maybe it's never too late, but be prudent. Take advice from people who've been doing this for a while. But I think for me, there's two sides. You're either trying to gather operational efficiency. You're trying to do something cheaper, maybe. You're trying to process more documents with less people, or you're trying to build a product that you couldn't build any other way. And recommendation engines and one of my favorites is Epidemic Sound. They have just released this search tool. You give it audio, and you search with the audio.
That's awesome.
That's key, because I've got this idea for a YouTube video, and I want to do this track, but I can't put that track in because, of course, it's not available. I'm going to get demonetized or whatever. So these are the kinds of things that something's going to come. We won't know. We weren't expecting it. There's drug discovery. I feel like every domain, computers are touching it. Software is touching it.
I think it's coolest to think of the most analog domains. Imagine like a tattoo studio using something like DALL-E to help a client design a new tattoo pattern.
Yeah, beautiful idea. I think it's designing stuff that we just have never been able to put into words, and now we have this tool that could create stuff for us that we're like, okay, what would that look like? I still joke that I want to see DALL-E draw itself. So someone needs to put that question to it.
Ask it to divide by zero.
Yeah, well, basically, it could be just crash and burn right there. But I'd love to see more tools like this, because it can only, I think, empower us. Like I'm not a great artist, so if I had something like that, I could at least talk about what I want. I know this is kind of the area of like no and low code tooling But as a computer scientist, I have a heavy bias against those tools.
Oh man, the equivalent in music is for me that I know guitar very well. I can program guitar very well. I just can't shred super fast. If I could ask Dolly to write that stuff for me, that would save me so much time instead of having to
just
go
sing to it.
Andreas, I'm like, can you record this for me? Yeah.
Do an air guitar and it'll watch you.
Yeah,
and be like,
Dolly just gets it and writes everything for me. That'd be great. So you are a scrappy hacker now. I mean, you know how to do a bunch of stuff, and you're business savvy. What is up for you? What is next for you, for Erik, in the coming 6 months and the near future?
Okay, so 6 months, I'm going to go back to California for the first time. So I'm looking for a little time off. Typical svensk tid för det. But I would like to come back to Sweden and reset. And I want to continue to open up, work and collaborate. I have fantastic colleagues. I've met them now that the pandemic has started to end. We actually got to meet at the Data Innovation Summit for the first time, some of us. And I just want to keep doing that more and more and see what we can build together. On the side, I've been always looking at passion projects and this open source stuff and tooling. So I'm looking to maybe go to a hackathon or two and just help out, advise. I think as I get later in my career, there's this feeling that you're driving forward and you're pushing and you want to be at the top. But in order to get to the next level, you have to turn around and look who's not behind you, but who hasn't been here yet, but they want to come here. And that's the only way that you're going to get higher to that next level is together. So I'm looking to keep continuing to collaborate with people all across the world. I've got friends back in Silicon Valley, and I just want to check in with them and see what's going on, because I'm just in awe of all the stuff that happens out there on the internet and open source world. It's fantastic.
You're going to spread the good word about Stockholm?
The great word. I always give props to Sweden and Stockholm. I think for me, it's been an absolute joy. I am not from Stockholm originally, so our family's from Småland. So one of my next things in the next 6 months is I have to drive down to Småland and do like this Allt för Sverige, kiss the ground thing.
You know, Småland's known for being very frugal.
I am very frugal. It's in the DNA. I feel Swedish in some way, but I know that I'm not. But deep down, there's a reason this place felt like home, and I feel super blessed for that. So, yeah,
that's awesome.
Tack så mycket.
All right, cool. Man, Erik, it's always fun to chat with you.
Yeah.
We got to eat a lot here and talk about a lot of AI stuff. So this is basically best kind of evening.
Toppen.
What do you say, Goran?
Yes. Let's go to the after work.
Så klart.
Right, so thank you for joining.
Tack själv.